In your Tuesday episode of Locked On Raptors, the Toronto Raptors have not fared particularly well against the league's elite this season, which could pose a problem if you look at the remaining schedule.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors. It is Tuesday, February the 24th. I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been around the way for a long time covering this basketball team. You can find my work over on Blue Sky. Find the show on Instagram. Join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. Link in the description of the podcast. As always, come be part of our listener community. And we're off and running here on your Tuesday episode of Locked On Raptors as we take a look at the remaining schedule for your local basketball team as they start the sort of stretch here of playing very, very good basketball teams in a majority of the remaining games. Tonight, they take on the Thunder tonight, then back-to-back tomorrow against the San Antonio Spurs, who are horrifying. And on today's show, we're going to dig into the Raptors' struggles against the league's elite teams. We'll dig into why they have struggled, whether or not there's any sort of noise in there that makes it look less or more favorable than it's been so far, what we'd like to see from the Raptors against the good teams they have on the slate down the stretch of the season. We're going to do it all with our dear pal, Vivek Jacob from Raptors in 7, fresh off of covering the Olympics for a couple of weeks. Are you having ski mountaineering withdrawals, Big B?
I'm not, but I know you are. I am missing the speed skating. Yeah, I'm missing the speed skating for sure. But I am glad to get some sleep in. I'm glad to be back on, actually operating on Eastern Standard Time. So that feels nice. And we'll get right into it with the Thunder and the Spurs, because why not?
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, the Thunder game tonight might not exactly take the shape of a regular Raptors Thunder game, as there's no Shea, there's no J-Dub, and there may be no Chet Holmgren, I believe questionable right now with back stuff. So we'll see. It might be kind of a B squad for the Thunder, but the Thunder are well coached. They're annoying. It's not going to be an easy game, even if all of their best players are out of the lineup, one would assume. But broadly speaking, Big V, this does kick off a stretch here where they play a good number of their games down the stretch against teams above 500. And as you wrote about in Raptors in 7 today, above 600 teams in particular is where they've really struggled this season. And they have a lot of games remaining against those teams on the remaining schedule. Of course, they have just 25 games remaining. They have the Spurs, the Thunder the next 2 nights, the Pistons twice, got waxed by them the first time they played. The Celtics, they've not had good luck with them this year. The Knicks, well-documented struggles. They play them twice. Houston, maybe they're gettable because they are kind of a shell of themselves and have infighting and seem to have rancid vibes. You got the Nuggets and then Miami twice as well. I believe the Wolves are also in there to close things out. Of course, they saw them play a pretty tight game with the Wolves a couple weeks ago where they came up just on the wrong end. Miami's in there because they are a top 10 overall point differential team. I think we could probably say they're not quite in that upper crust elite tier, but I included them in the list of teams they have that are good down the stretch because they do have, surprisingly, a top 10 point differential based on some kind of blowouts against bad teams of late. So Big V, I guess let's start here. How much does it matter to you that the Raptors have struggled against the league's very best teams? I've kind of made the claim on this show that what the Raptors have done, struggling against the very best, beating up on the rest of the league, they've kind of put themselves very firmly in the position of they are either the 10th or 11th best team in the NBA, no better, no worse. And I think that's probably pretty good compared to preseason expectations. Of course, you'd like to see them perform better against the very, very good teams, but does it matter to you that they have not so far? And if they continue these losing ways against the very best, does it at all change your perception of what this season has been for the Raptors?
No, I mean, it doesn't really change the perception. I think it changes the evaluation moving forward and
Sure.
what needs to be done in the off season and how this team needs to address getting better. I think the first thing I'll say is yes, absolutely. You want the Raptors to have a record that boasts more than just, being 23-7 against sub 500 teams.
Sure.
And I think when you look at that gap, those teams that are above 500, but below 600, they've actually done pretty well. And that's
Yeah.
where, they've been able to take on, the Miami Heat and look really good. They've had other results against those teams in that space, uh, and have delivered. And so if you were to come into the season and say, hey, the only teams the Raptors are going to be struggling against are the ones that are kind of closer to that title contention, you would have taken that. And
Mhm.
so I think there's more positive to be gleaned from that overall record against, sub 600 teams, than there is from that, 4-14 record against plus 600 teams.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's where I stand overall.
Yeah, and look, we're still, I think, kind of in small sample zone a little bit with their games against these good teams. Obviously, the Cavs games, those comprise 3 of those 14 wins against plus 600
Yep.
teams. So if you take those out, 1-14, not exactly pretty. Of course, there's injury. Jakob Poeltl missed a bunch of time. RJ Barrett missed a bunch of time. Other teams they've played have kind of gone through their ups and downs. Maybe you hit a team where they're kind of at their best, like the early season Rockets, for example. It's still a tiny amount of games in the grand scheme of things to draw any firm conclusions, but I think it's pretty fair to say, like, they're a little bit punching below their weight against those very good teams based on what we've seen. I kind of go by clean the glass just to kind of do my research and stats on this, and they, kind of separated out by sort of top 10 teams in all sort of, overall point differential, offense, defense, and the Raptors this season against teams in the top 10 on both ends of the floor are 1-7. They are 5th in offense against those teams, which is kind of weird. Maybe we dig into that a little bit. 29th in defense against those teams. Not ideal. Though weird, again, there's sort of weird noise and variance maybe tied into all of this. Overall, against good defenses, they've been fantastic. Against just the top 10 defenses, they're the 4th best offense in the league. Against the top 10 offenses, they're the 11th best defense in the league. It's their offense that's cratered against good offenses. It's a very strange data set to try to pull anything real from, as is usually the case when you're dealing with just a handful of games comprising a data set. But it is a very murky picture, but it also maybe just comes down to the simple fact of, they're less talented than those very good teams, and so they lose to those teams a lot. Is there anything you're pulling from that sort of murky set of numbers that is either encouraging to you or very discouraging as it pertains to how they might stack up against these teams down the stretch here, V?
I'd say the one that is discouraging is when you look at those games where, say, if they're going up against a Boston, for example, and you can kind of just feel that difference in physicality. Detroit
Sure.
recently was another example, and
Mhm.
it's like they have to learn, what playing with that level of intensity and physicality is like,
Mhm.
and
Sure.
that's where, depending on how these next 25 games go, plus playoffs, you take the lessons, you take, the samples and evaluate the guys and see, okay, how does this go up another notch in the off season? I think, the stat you brought up about going up against the top offenses,
Mhm.
um, and why there's struggles there, just from the eye test, for me, it does feel like that's where, the Raptors' inability to keep up with the threes and really, keep up with just good offense
Mhm.
uh, comes back to bite them, because I think there is an element of like, man, like we have to do so much to keep up offensively that it just gets tougher and tougher, and that weighs on you. And,
Yeah.
and I think that there's that carryover effect that we see.
Yeah, I think like the Knicks matchups in particular are a pretty good example of that. The Wolves game too, I thought, was one of those too, where it's just like, they and in those matchups, like they found solid stuff in the half court from time to time. Like the Wolves game was one of their best offensive games of the season. But I do think when you're playing against really elite offenses, even though the Raptors have been all right at actually slowing them down, like I said, 11th against the best offenses in the league, there is an element of so much of their offense comes from running off of misses. And when those teams are just hitting everything, it's hard to get that sort of transition machine going, and it all kind of bleeds into both ends of the floor. It's an interesting team, man, with a lot of sort of weird contradictions within the numbers against these really good teams. I should also say and point out, No one is good against the very good teams. There are 2 teams in the NBA with a positive point differential against teams in the top 10 on both ends of the floor. They are the Wolves, who are a plus 5.7. Maybe they're stealth title contenders, and the Spurs, who are plus 3.6. Every other team is sub-zero, negative against the best teams on both ends of the floor. And if you just take it out to the top 10 teams in point differential overall, only 5 teams have positive point differentials. And the Raptors are 11th against teams with the top 10 point differentials. So again, they are the 10th or 11th best team in the league in basically every single metric. We'll come back on the other side here, Big V. I want to get into some of the things we think the Raptors can do to better equip themselves against these really good teams. We'll talk about some of the stuff that might make it successful between now and the end of the season, that we kind of look back on their performance against the really good teams, and also get into some of the matchups we're really keen on watching and the ones that might tell us the most about where the Raptors sit. We'll do that coming up in just 1 second. Today's show is brought to you by friends over at Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inboxes overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on, you need the right hire. This is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all the boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It really is a huge time saver to go and get those sponsored jobs in front of the people you actually want to hire, as opposed to sifting through resumes and applications from people who just aren't a good fit. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your premium job status, help you get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed here on this podcast, Locked On Raptors. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And we're back here with Big V. Before we dive on into some more talk of the Raptors' struggles against the league's elite, a reminder, you can join the Locked On Raptors Everydayer Club. The link is in the description of the podcast. It's 100%. It's not free to join. It's $5 a month, $50 for the year. Our regular Discord, the Locked On Raptors Discord, is 100% free. If you join our Everydayer Club, you'll get access to a Locked On Discord, which is lovely. We've got like over 1,000 people in there. There's specific team chats. There's specific sports chats. There's a general chat. It's a great place to come hang out, talk about sports with people on the internet who aren't toxic and mean like they are on the other websites. And so we'd love to see you become part of our family of Locked On Everydayer Club listeners over there. And again, $5 a month, $50 for the year gets you that, plus ad-free episodes of the show every single day. Go check it out. All right, Big V. Let's dive into what we want to see here down the stretch. I don't think anyone has sort of pie in the sky expectations necessarily that the Raptors are going to go rattle off against these remaining teams like a 600 or 700 or 800 record and sort of compile enough wins to maybe scratch 50 wins on the season. Like, I would imagine there's going to be some hardship here, even if they get some schedule luck like tonight against the Thunder, for example, and maybe some teams will be resting dudes down the stretch, as happens in March and April in the NBA. Still feels like there's going to be some like real tests of the Raptors' mettle, and it's likely that they won't quite live up to them based on what we've seen so far this year. What to you would constitute a successful finish to the season, as they have the 8th hardest schedule and all those teams on the schedule that I talked about? What are you looking for to kind of make you feel good and a little warmer and fuzzier about it all than you felt so far in their performance against really good teams?
Yeah, so I kind of talked about this in my latest That Raptors in 7, and I think the biggest thing, that we maybe hold on to right now has been the general lack of availability for Yak.
Sure.
And RJ's missed quite a lot of games too. And so I think if we were to see both of them be genuinely healthy, and then you see an uptick in the offense, in just the way they're able to compete in these games, I think that would then be probably the most encouraging thing that could happen.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, I think, I go back to just that physicality and that intensity. I think there's games where the Raptors have seemed overwhelmed by it and then have kind of almost like waved the white flag.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where I do want to see some improvement. And I think that's something that they can control and kind of say, hey, okay, like this final stretch, we want to gear up for the playoffs. Like if a team really starts to hand it to us, like I mean, even watching the Bucks game, like yeah, that was a really positive win. And lots of good things happen in that game. But that moment when Bobby Portis kind of takes a shot at CMB, like I'd like to see someone go at him and say something.
Right. Right.
Like, and those are the little things that I do want to see where, hey, like if someone's gonna come at you, like let's see the team rally around each other a bit more.
Yeah, fair enough. You tell me Bobby Portis took a shot at someone? That doesn't sound like him. Yeah, I think that those games, I mean, the Pistons one's a great example. The Magic game, right, where they blew the fourth quarter and just looked totally overwhelmed by the waves of just like elbows and size and nastiness that what Magic were throwing at them. Like, yeah, those I think are sort of flashpoint games. And the Magic aren't on my list of really good teams they play down the stretch. They do play them still down the stretch one more time, I think. That'll be a telling one as well. The Heat, obviously, they play them twice. They're a physical kind of annoying team. And I think the Raptors have had some moments where they've really kind of shown that punch back and resilience, just maybe not against those very, very great teams. And so, the Houston Rockets, I think, will be a good example of this as well, right? They just got kind of moved around by the Rockets, like little chess pieces on their offensive rebounding, spamming board. Obviously, no Steven Adams when they end up playing them coming up here, but, still a team that likes to throw elbows and whatnot. It's tough because, it's a very kind of intangible thing almost that it's hard to kind of figure out, hey, do they have it within them or not? I think they have a handful of guys who I would sort of classify in the sort of physical bruiser category. I think for sure Scotty Barnes has that in him. I think Colin Murray-Boyles has that in him. Does Jakob Poeltl have it in him? I'm not sure. Is Brandon Ingram, Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett? I think it's an open question for discussion. And I'm not even sure that, end of the day, I think skill and talent usually prevails over sort of bruising, especially in the playoffs where everyone's kind of trying really hard and kind of throwing their best effort at you. And, maybe the sort of advantage that comes from being a try hard physical team in the regular season gets diminished just a little bit. But certainly the playoffs are physical, the playoffs are a grind, and you got to kind of meet that where they're kind of meeting you. As far as just record goes, I mean, if they go, I don't know, let's say there's what is it, 10 games they have left against plus 600 teams. If they go 4-6, 3-7, is that enough for you to feel okay, there have been some strides here? Obviously, that would be essentially doubling the number of wins they have against good teams so far this year in a very short stretch. If they go 1-9, is it a disaster? Obviously, if they go any better than 4-6, if they go 500 or better, then maybe you're feeling a whole lot different about their odds in the playoffs. What's kind of riding on these final 10 games against elite teams for you?
Yeah, I think 4-6 would be significant. I think, especially if you were to just go back to grouping the Cavs as a sub 600 team, the version that the Raptors beat as a sub 600 team, then you're looking at a 1-14 record. And so then to go 4-6 and say, the things I said before, where it's Yak is making these meaningful plays that it's this is what was missing. RJ is, cutting at those opportune moments against these good teams, and the offense isn't cratering and all of that. All of a sudden, then it's okay, you go from, say, for example, if you were thinking, the Raptors, because of this schedule, are kind of destined to be 5th or 6th, to now potentially finishing 4th and having home court for that first round playoff series, and thinking, okay, they can win this, but now you might say, hey, okay, if they went 4-6, maybe they beat Boston in there and they showed the things that you needed to see. Now maybe that second round series is looking like it can be competitive too. So yeah, I think 4-6 or better would be significant.
Yeah, no doubt. It's there's some things maybe outside of record I'm kind of maybe more interested in than just the raw record too. I think
yeah. I mean, I should say the caveat, if it's 4-6 and it's they're beating OKC without Chet and Shea and Jalen Williams, obviously that's not
good. So we on paper, baby. No one will ever know. I think, like, can they figure out how to score a little more competently against the really high-powered offenses? I think kind of keep pace, I think, is something I'm watching for. Obviously the offense has had its moments of being really good and a lot more moments of being pretty bad this year. They've had some, I think, pretty high watermarks of late, and Emmanuel quickly kind of figuring things out, and a bit of 3-point regression back up to the mean of late for the team has been really valuable to kind of figuring things out. Obviously, they still have yet to really play with everyone that they, kind of intend to have. And when they have had all their starters on the floor, the starters have been quite good offensively. Can they get RJ Barrett back into the swing of things after his recent struggles? Can Pirtle get up to speed? All this stuff. I think it is in them to be a little more effective offensively against those very good offensive teams to kind of give them more of a puncher's chance. And then against the really good defensive teams, like, I know they've performed quite well against those teams, but I am curious to see if they can sustain that, right? Fourth in the league against the top 10 defenses feels like at once extremely awesome and encouraging, and also like it could fall apart at any moment, because we've seen them up against, the Pistons, for example, where it's just like they kind of run their sort of, maze of off-ball screens to get Brandon Ingram loose, and they shut it all down, and all of a sudden you're kind of bailing yourself out with something late in the clock, and the offense hasn't been super imaginative in those situations. Like, that's where I think against physicality, it's not so much as even like meeting the physicality themselves and being as like elbowy as other teams. It's, can they kind of find ways on offense in particular to sort of navigate through the physicality and let their skill kind of shine through? I think that's a really important question. And I think, we've seen, I think the last couple of games, they've, experimented with some different ways of getting Brandon Ingram the ball, for example, not relying on those same sets to get him the ball, get him those post-up opportunities, things like that. Can they do that against good teams that aren't the Bulls and the Bucks? I think that's really, I think, a key thing I'm watching for down the stretch, to see if they can kind of make a more sustainable offensive ecosystem hold up against those really good defensive teams. And again, they performed quite well so far, so maybe there's some encouraging notes there. I want to come back to this side, talk about the matchups that are the most like specifically important to you. They probably are the ones involving teams the Raptors might play in the first round of the playoffs. We will talk about the Celtics, the Knicks, the Pistons, and all that coming up to close things out in just a sec. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, and right now there's a really great opportunity to go and have a trip of a lifetime won by you at FanDuel. If you ever wanted to go to the NBA Finals live and in person, FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right. Flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is a perfect time to lock in. Maybe you're someone who's always wanted to go to San Antonio or Denver or Oklahoma City. All of those could be possible locations for you to head. Maybe you're a Minneapolis person. You want to go check out and have a big Juicy Lucy. We love Juicy Lucy's, the most delicious and disgusting kind of burger there is. And if the Wolves make the finals, that could be you if you go and play your profit boost on an NBA futures bet right now over at FanDuel. Of course, there's the Eastern Conference cities as well. New York's cool, I guess. Are they going to make it? Who's to say? Detroit, just a quick drive down the road. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for a chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals this spring. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Back at it here with Big V, Vivek Jacob, as we continue to take stock of the Raptors. Not looking so hot against the league's best, a thing that will be tested time and again down the stretch. It's very weird split for the Raptors, where they play basically only great teams or awful teams, with only a couple of teams in the middle kind of sprinkled in. Quite the sort of swing, I think, night to night with a lot of these tanking teams lined up in addition to these very good teams. As far as the individual matchups against the teams that the Raptors have traditionally struggled against this year, is there one that stands above the rest that you really want to see the Raptors kind of figure some stuff out with? I think there are two obvious candidates, and they might be two of the likely first-round opponents for the Raptors, although maybe the Celtics are kind of putting themselves into a different stratosphere with what they're doing. But, Knicks, Celtics, I think those two are the easy ones here. Is there someone else that stands out? Who you got as sort of the matchup you have your eye most keenly fixed upon as we go down this stretch run?
Yeah, so as you said, Knicks, Celtics, those are obvious ones. But if the Raptors do end up in that 4-5 matchup, then you do want to see how things go against the Pistons and pay close attention to that if that ends up being a second round matchup.
Sure.
You're not going to see the Cavs, so that would have been nice to get a look at them with James Harden.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think beyond that, for me, you're probably looking at Detroit and saying, okay, how can you compete with these guys? And when you look at the way that program has taken off, it feels like they've skipped some steps in almost a healthy way. Like
Mhm.
you do feel like they're ahead of the curve and have like shifted goalposts sooner than you would have anticipated. Like I'm at the
Sure.
point now where it's like it is not going to be a surprise if they're playing the NBA finals at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
And that is not something I would have guessed going into the season. So yeah, I think that's a matchup to keep an eye out for sure. I think that Magic game uh,
Yeah.
is one that I'll be watching out for. The response when you look at the way that last game ended, and Desmond Bain is kind of handing it to you, throwing the ball at you, all of that, like just coming back to that point of like just not taking that type of stuff anymore.
Mhm.
I think that's a game that I probably have marked on the calendar saying this needs to be a response game.
Yeah, yeah. I think I hate the Magic. I really want to see them beat the Magic. I don't know why this happened. I think they've just become like my second least favorite team in the NBA, behind the Celtics. It's and it's kind of irrational, but it's just kind of
Yeah.
something about them. Maybe it's the fact that, I mean, every team is owned by ghouls, but their owners are particularly ghoulish and just kind of a joyless team to watch. Anyway, back to my original question. I think the Knicks are the answer here. Like, I think things might be tracking towards that being a 4-5 matchup. The Knicks are struggling, and the Cavs are very much surging. They're a game behind the Knicks right now, and I think the Knicks are very good, and they still would probably be my pick to come out of the conference. Although that's getting a little more wobbly by the week. I do think the Raptors should have more for that matchup, though. And I think, having guys out of the lineup hasn't been great. Jakob Poeltl will be a helpful player to have in those lineups where Mitchell Robinson is in there just kind of wreaking havoc, and kind of going up against the Knicks as like a totally small team. It's not the easiest thing in the world. There's also, the sort of difficulty the Knicks pose as a team that's like playing 5 out when they have Towns on, and Josh Hart's not missing a damn thing all season long. And I think the Raptors, now that they've kind of played around with some small ball looks and have figured some things out, I think they have some sort of adjustments and tools they can use in those matchups that don't involve Jakob Poeltl, that maybe they haven't leaned on before. The Knicks are a really good offensive team. Like, the Raptors are only going to be able to slow them down so much. But I do think the Knicks are also not like a great shakes defensive team, and there's stuff you can poke at. And obviously, like the Brunson Cat pick and roll is one thing in particular that you really want to try to see if you can kind of, do the matchup spamming thing a little bit and see if you can pull that apart. I think defensively, we saw flashes in that last Raptors Knicks game of the Murray-Boyles Barnes duo being like an excellent foil for the Brunson Cat pick and roll, pick and pop, where you can just switch that and feel good about both guys staying in front and kind of holding up against the other guy. It's a fascinating matchup, and I feel like the Raptors have kind of like shown little inklings, like the first half and 2.5 quarters of that game against the Knicks the last time they played. That was like, okay, this is tight. They're in it, and then it just kind of all fell apart. Same in the NBA Cup game. Like, there's something there, I think, that the Raptors have kind of yet to tap into, that they can kind of take to the Knicks a little bit. And then the Pistons, I think, are a great one too. I mean, before the game last week, I went in, or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, like, I went in, and I still believe this, like, of all the teams in the top 4 of the East, I feel the Pistons are probably the best matchup for the Raptors because their offense is not as potent. And I feel like because they're so Cade centric, like, there's a way to kind of use the Raptors' length and the tools they have with Murray-Boyles, who wasn't available for that Pistons game, and Barnes to kind of create enough hell in Cade's life and sort of lean on the non-shooting and the offensive struggles that a lot of those guys on that team have, and kind of press an advantage that way. They didn't do it in that first game. They got totally moved around, and it was not pretty, but I do think they have more for that matchup as well. It's I don't know. Do you have anything you want to add on top of that?
No, I think those are Good points. I think that is why you kind of look at the Pistons. When you look at the way that game against the Spurs even played out down the stretch, right? It was
Mm,
like that lack of offense that can be exposed
mhm.
beyond Cade
Yeah.
is something that, even theoretically coming into the season, you were saying like, hey, okay, which teams are going to be in that Raptors tier? And I didn't feel like the Pistons did enough to supplement, Cade after what happened with Malik Beasley and
Mhm.
just and Tim Hardaway's exit as well. But obviously, like Duncan Robinson has done well. They've been able to, you know, just really impose their will defensively. And Cade is
Tobias Harris still just like fending off the Grim Reaper. It's kind of
yeah,
wild. Yeah.
yeah, and Cade has just taken it to another level, right? Like
Yeah,
the guy
totally.
is a legitimate MVP candidate. And I feel like the Raptors, to your point, like when you look at that Boston team, when you look at that New York team, that 3-point volume uh, is something that Detroit does not possess to
Yeah.
really intimidate, and that's where you feel like, at least theoretically, the Raptors should have a path to uh, being competitive in a 7-game series against the Pistons.
Yeah, like I mean, obviously the Pistons are better at both ends of the floor, but kind of similar profiles in that they're way more sort of successful on the defensive end, and their offense just kind of like gets by. I mean, they're the 10th best offense in the league. It's not like they're terrible by any means, but there is something there, I think, to kind of exploit, especially in a playoff series, right? Like playoffs are all about exploiting the weaknesses other teams have, and the Raptors will have those too, and they will have guys who get picked at it, in defensive matchups and things like that. But with the Pistons, like I think the sort of lack of secondary creation, the lack of shooting, the lack of, I think, balance they can find with their very best lineups and sort of trying to juggle, offense, defense, I think could be something that the Raptors hopefully can kind of play around with and exploit even in these remaining games, where hopefully they're kind of taking it to it and treating them like playoff games. I do think, every game matters in the standings. Yes, there's a cushion building now between the 5th and the 6th seed for the Raptors, which is very nice, but you want to try to climb into that top 4 if you can, get some home court. And, it's still very much on the table for them that they can string together some wins against these very good teams, which, again, haven't done it so far this year, but no better time than the present to start figuring it out. And by the present, I mean tonight against the Shadow Thunder. Wouldn't that be lovely? Any last parting shots here, Big V? And if not, plug away, whatever you got to plug for the good people out there.
No, I mean, we wanted to focus on obviously those plus 600 teams and the quality of those opponents. I'd say, even if things kind of shake out the way they have to this point, the Raptors need to make sure they take care of the other side of the equation.
Oh God,
Seven.
yes, please. Yeah. Don't be losing to the Jazz, for the love of God.
Yeah, yeah. 7 of the opponents down the stretch here against sub 400 teams.
Mhm.
Like you got to go 7-0, 6-1 in those games.
Yep. Yeah, like when teams are actively trying to lose games, you cannot be handing them unwanted wins by not bringing it. It would be very disappointing if that were the case. Almost did it against the Bulls on Thursday before, they got things sorted out. But yeah, more games like the one against the Bucks. I'm in favor of that. We're going to leave it there. Everyone go support Big V's work. Raptors in 7. Go check it out. You can find me at Discord. The Discord's the main thing. Link in the description of the podcast. Come hang out. You can also find me on Blue Sky, shows on Instagram, all that good stuff. You can also join the Everydayer Club. Link in the description of the podcast as well. Go to the landing page there. $5 a month, $50 for the year gets you ad-free episodes of the show and gets you access to our Locked On network-wide Discord with lots of little sports freakies in there, talking sports like little freakies, and we love the little freakies over here. Anyway, thanks so much. We'll talk to you on Wednesday, breaking down Raptors Thunder. You got the postcast tonight with Zulfi and Dwayne right after the game finishes up, and then we'll look ahead tomorrow to Raptors Spurs as well. Joe Wolf on back later in the week, all that good stuff. Anyway, thanks for hanging. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.